Old School Bodybuilding Clothing Company. If it's been 3.5 hours since you last ate protein and now you're starting to freak out, you are old school. If watching someone sit on a hammer machine for 5 minutes between sets playing with their phone pisses you off, you are definitely old school. OSBBC.com for the hardest training athletes.
I'm Dave Palumbo, founder of Species Nutrition. From my earliest bodybuilding days, I believed in only putting the best in my body, and that lives on in the Species Nutrition line of products. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
After working hard at the gym, you need a mattress that works as hard as you do. Spinaline has engineered the perfect mattress for you and your active lifestyle. Don't compromise your recovery with inferior sleep. Order your Spinaline mattress today.
Hey guys, we're super excited to be here at the LA Fit Expo. It's our third year in a row. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be launching the Tasty Pastry. It's a low-carb Pop-Tart. It's got 3 to 4 grams of net carbs. And we love this show. This is our best place to be in LA.
RX Television on rxmuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. All your questions, diet, training, supplementation, IFBB, pros, news, whatever's on your mind, it is all on the table. Speaking of news, so we now bring in Dave Palumbo. We did post yesterday on our Instagram. Now, it was first reported by IFBB pro Natalia Coelho, who said that she spoke to the Arnold Classic promoters and that the scenario was that it's going to be, the show's going to be on September 25th, either in Columbus, Ohio, where it's traditionally been, or the other city that was floated was Santa Monica, California. So we posted on Instagram again with a disclaimer that we had not yet confirmed it. Dave, you just were in touch with Bob Lorimer. He just texted you back a little while ago. What did he have to say?
Yeah, Bob and I always go right to the source because, you know, either him or Matt Lors. By the way, I have laryngitis, so sorry about that. I'm going to take a little sip here. That's what kids back in school will do that to you. Bob basically told me that the problem is they can't find a place where they can have a huge assembly of people. There's just not that many places you can do that. I know they want to do it in Columbus, Ohio. That's their hometown. That's the town that they have fed with the Arnold Classic, you know, over the years. That town's whole economy operates around that. I can't even imagine what's going on since the Arnold has not been there. But they want to hold the show. They just don't know where to do it at this point. And so there's no confirmation. And he told me that, you know, when they do have a confirmation, obviously he will let us know, you know, directly, because no one wants to hold the show more than he does. So right now there is none, though.
So, as you just heard from Dave, right now, no confirmation either way. They are floating a couple of different scenarios. So, again, keep it locked. As soon as we hear back anything more concrete from there, and we will be sure to report it. But right now, that's the latest rumor, at least. that it's going to be September 25th and either in Columbus or Santa Monica. But as Bob Lorimer just reported to us directly from the source, they're still not sure. Let's go to the questions. The first two questions, of course, from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. The first question, Dave, what are the reasons behind sides on GH, like carpal tunnel, like numbness in hand, etc.? Anything to combat sides that you utilize in your career, and what sides did you experience?
When I took it, no one really used super, super high dosages because it was just too expensive. And as far as side effects that I got, I never got the carpal tunnel, like tingling finger type thing. I got it later on down the road when I would use Serostim, which was a little stronger and it was a little more affordable. And it's a dose-related thing, so you could just cut back your dose a little bit. I think guys start off a little too high right off the bat, and sometimes that it's like because you do retain fluid from it. Most of the fluid you retain, though, is good fluid inside the muscle. But when everything gets stretched out, sometimes those nerves can get pinched off in your wrist here. I don't think it's necessary from the growth making anything grow because it happens immediately. So it's a fluid retention thing, and when you stop it, it goes, or even lower the dose, it goes away. You know what I used to notice when I would take it? I have 4 wisdom teeth that I'd never gotten pulled out, and they would move. I would feel like movement when I was on GH, which I guess is good. It means it's working, right? And I actually had 2 wisdom teeth individually pulled out during 2 contest preps that I was on, like Lily GH. And I only had the one taken out at a time because I didn't want to like really compromise my ability to eat in my contest prep. But 2 years in succession, this was like maybe like 95 and 96, I had my wisdom teeth pulled, and I still have 2 in my mouth that weren't impacted or turned the wrong way, so I just left them. They never really moved around. But that was one thing that I noticed from it a lot. We never really did blood sugar checks back then because the glucometers were expensive and really no one really knew about that. But I don't know if my blood sugars were high, but like I said, I didn't really use higher dosages. Like I always was like around 2 IUs because it was, like I said, it was so expensive back in the day. It was literally for 12 IUs of Lilly Humatrope, it was like $230, and that's if like you got lucky and got a good, that's a week's supply of 2 IUs a day, not even. So that's expensive, when you're first starting out, you're in your early 20s and I just got out of med school, and I didn't really have a high-paying job at that point. So I didn't really get that many side effects. When I went to Serostim a little later in my career, when I actually could afford it, I would get a little fluid retentive, I think, from it. I always kept my dosages lower because my stomach would get really bloated if I took too much of it. And but I never really had like pains. Like some people complain of like, I think the younger you are, you could get some bone growth from it. Like, I had a friend who was using it at 18, and he actually grew a couple inches while he was on it. And he said his knees used to hurt a little bit, his elbows hurt a little bit. So everyone has different reactions to it. If it's a dose-related thing, which it usually is, just lower the dose a little bit. And usually, like I said, the carpal tunnel and all the hand tingling when you're waking up with tingling fingers, that'll all go away.
Second question, again from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Dave, can you explain the difference between macadamia nut oil and MCT oil? It goes Cap Tri by Parillio Performance, and why one would be more beneficial in an everyday bodybuilding diet.
Yeah. Well, from a fuel standpoint, I guess a fat is a fat, in terms of fuel. If anything, MCT fat or medium chain triglycerides. Most fats we talk about are long chain triglycerides, meaning there's multiple fat molecules linked together. But for medium chain fats, the body handles these things differently. The way a fat gets absorbed is fats pass right through the cell membrane of, let's talk about muscle cells for a minute. If a muscle cell wants to use fat as a fuel source, the fatty acid can go right through the cell membrane because the cell membrane is fat soluble. And then to get into the mitochondria, which is where fats get burned or oxidized, we need a transporter. L-carnitine is the transporter inside the cell that will transport these long chain fats into the mitochondria. So that's the limiting step. It's not getting into the cell, it's getting into the mitochondria. Medium chain fats don't require, and short chain fats who don't require carriers, don't require L-carnitine, so they can pass directly through the cell membrane and then right into the mitochondria where they'll get burned for fuel. So they're kind of called the fatless fat because they're fuel sources essentially. they don't really have any other function, these medium chain fats, by and far. Whereas something like macadamia nut oil, which is a long chain fat, okay, which does require a carrier to get it into the mitochondria, okay, which would limit its ability as it wouldn't get used as energy as quickly as, say, a medium chain fat, but it has essential fat uses, meaning there's omega-3s in there, there's omega-6 fats in there, which we know are obviously essential fatty acids. There's a very large amount of monounsaturated fats in macadamia nut oil. So it's a multi-oil type fat. The monounsaturated, or your omega-9s, are not essential, but they're very heart healthy. They help, inflammation in the body, lower it. They help with fixing your cholesterol profiles in favor of the HDLs, lowering LDL cholesterol. So they're good for your body. They're actually, even though they don't get used as a fuel source as quickly as MCT fats, they are a really good fuel source. I find that when you really fortify a person's diet with monounsaturated fats, they're always sweating. Their metabolism picks up a lot. So I like to use them for that. So for my purposes, if I'm going to give someone, especially in a dieting scenario, fats, okay, in their diet as part of, their macronutrient profile, I would rather give them something that has essential uses in the body other than just fuel, so that the body is using them for good purpose, in a sense. Also, by taking in these fats, especially essential fatty acids, your body will sense that it's not fat deprived. So a lot of times when guys do contest diets, and especially you see this in women a lot, they get really lean on their upper body, and their lower body doesn't get lean at all. It's like the fat just won't leave there. And that's because they're devoid of these essential fatty acids, and because of that, the body is hoarding fat. Even though the calories may be lower than the body needs for the day, fatty acid wise, they're not getting what their bodies need, and so their body is hoarding fat. And in women, it usually happens in the lower body because of estrogen, and then sometimes you'll see it around the lower back, waist area. They just have this trouble area. They can't get rid of that spare tire. And that can be also because the body is hoarding fat. So you definitely want to make sure you're taking enough fat. So once again, if I'm putting fats into a diet, to me, medium chain fats, while they have a place at some point, I would rather give a person something that has essential uses in the body.
Let's go to our Instagram questions. Again, if you're not already following us, our handle is official_RX Muscle. If you're watching us for the first time on YouTube, hit the subscribe button below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss any of our shows, segments, or updates right now on the channel. All new episodes of Heavy Muscle Radio and the After Hours podcast. Go to Ralph Adriel. I see a lot of bodybuilders and fitness researchers say anterior delts are work enough during chest presses, yet I see so many bodybuilders doing iso work for the anterior delt. Do I need to keep things like overhead presses and front raises?
It's like asking, I have guys tell me, you don't need to train abs because your abs get indirectly worked doing squats and all these other core exercises. Or I don't need to do forearms because I'm doing massive bicep curls and stuff like that. You know what? If you leave out any body part, you create a weak link. Okay, you never want to create a weak link. And that's the most concise answer I can give you. When you leave out anything, that you open yourself to problems. Now, what was the muscle they were talking about again?
Anterior delts.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought. It's my I'm in a fog from my laryngitis. I like to train anterior delts. I'll tell you why. Because you can never get too much cap, okay, to the front, in that standing relaxed pose. You want that nice cap here. Now, the reason why people don't like to overtrain their front delts is because they think it overpowers their pecs. I say just make your upper pecs bigger. And that's why when I give workouts out a lot of times to people, I don't even give them flat bench pressing type movements. Everything's inclined because you want a nice big thick upper chest to complement a nice front cap delt. You don't want to, it's like saying, well, my upper body is so good. My legs are so good that I'll just downsize them to match my upper body. No, why would you take a great body part and make it not as good? Get your upper body bigger, If you have great front delts, don't detrain them. Get your upper pecs to match. That's the right solution. So it's always important to never leave something as a weak link, okay? If you're going to train your side delts and you're going to train your rear delts, then you train your front delts too. Now, granted, they do get indirectly work on presses, but who cares? You want full development. I mean, think of anyone. Look at Ruli Winkler's shoulders. He's probably got some of the best delts in the business, and he's got so much development in the front, the side, the rear. That's why that shoulder looks enormous when he hits shots. From most musculars to side chests, you got to get full development. Nothing looks worse than when you're missing something. Oh, he's got good side delts and good rear delts, but his front delts are a little undersized, but his pecs look good. Well, who cares? Now your shoulders are underdeveloped. So I would recommend doing it, yeah.
Let's go to Rory World. I know we've gotten this question, I guess, in different variations, but do you think that the Olympia should visit different countries every year, like nearly all professional international sport pinnacles do? In my opinion, that's how the sport can grow. Also allows some to compete who cannot attain U.S. visas.
I'll give you an argument for both. I think it should travel around. I think it's important that the Olympia be in different countries and that these other countries be privy to it, in a sense. I love the idea. As a competitor, I would love it too. I think just, because when you go to these other countries, they want to make you feel important. I guarantee you, if they held the Olympia, like in Qatar or Dubai, these bodybuilders would feel like, they're like LeBron James, there. And that's something that, that all athletes should be able to experience, being treated, with the red carpet rolled out, VIP all the way, staying in a 7-star hotel in Dubai and that kind of stuff. I think that would be great for the athletes. I understand the business model is probably going to make more money, keeping it in the US, obviously, especially the way they were doing it in Vegas every year, because they had a whole venue and everything was set up, and it was obviously a lot of the people who go to these shows are from the US. So that was important in that sense. Now with COVID around, I don't even know if it matters anymore with the whole venue. I almost say go everywhere, but then again, you can't travel. So the travel restrictions are crazy. So right now it's hard, but if COVID wasn't here, I would like to see it move around. I think it might even bring more money into the fray, because now they could have countries bid on the Olympia. Hey, I'll put up this much money, prize money. I'll put up this much for the sanction fee. I think Jay can make a lot of money doing that. I mean, I don't know if that's the goal, but I think it would raise the Olympia up to a higher level. And now with live streaming, who cares where it is? As long as you have a crew out there to film the thing and you make that part of the sponsorship. Hey, you want to host the Olympia? You got to have a live stream that is dynamite out there so that everyone around the world can watch this thing. I think it would be a great idea. I think it would add a little more excitement to the whole thing. Either way, I'm okay with it, but I think it is an international show, and as an athlete, I think I would have wanted to be able to travel around the world to do these shows in VIP type fashion.
Let's go to Akshay Pandey. How to manage diet and maintain muscle mass when one is sick with the cold or flu? I know seemingly now it just seems as if you're sick. It's assumed that it's COVID, obviously. Yes, like you have laryngitis. Yeah. Flu is still very much out there. Allergy season is very much out there. So if you're down for a while, how would you go about doing those things?
What my rule of thumb is when I tell people is if you have a fever, stay home and rest. I didn't always listen to that advice myself. I remember one time that I was getting a virus. You know how when you first start getting the virus, you get the chills a little bit, and you know it's coming on. You haven't gotten hit full force so that you still got some energy, but you're starting to get that little chilly, achy feeling. And I said, you know what, I got to do legs. I should have gone home and gone to sleep. I probably would have gotten over it in one day. I went and I did a killer leg workout. I don't even know how I got through the leg workout because it really hadn't hit me yet. And I was like, after the workout, I felt terrible. I said, I got to go home. I went home, I guzzled a shakedown, and I climbed into bed. I was shivering and everything like that. And I just passed out. I was laid out for 3 days, at that. This was way, way back. And probably if I hadn't done that, I probably would have overwhelmed my immune system. I probably would have recovered fine from it. But if you have a fever, stay home. If you have a sniffle or a little cough, and your fever is normal, get your ass to the gym. I can't even tell you how many people with the excuses, even people that I work with, I didn't feel good, or I had a little cramp, and I had a stomach ache, and I had a cough, and I had a sniffle, couldn't go to the gym. I'm like, give me a break. I mean, unless you're dying, you go to the gym. Like I said, or if you have a fever, that's the only time you absolutely stay home. Now, if you're coughing up, like if you have pneumonia, even though you don't have a fever, I wouldn't go to the gym, obviously, because you can't breathe. But I'm talking about, like, if you would send your kids to school, then get your ass to the gym. That's how I look at it.
Let's go to Marco Antonio Miranda Pena. Thoughts on DHT delivered compounds and prep cycle, how to apply winstrol, masteron, or primo in our test base or TRT. Best way to combine those to get shredded.
It's a lot of questions right there, but DHT-based compounds are just or steroids that are manufactured from a DHT-based molecule. So they take DHT, dihydrotestosterone, and they chemically alter it, and then they can make winstrol and masteron and primo. But just because they're derived from DHT doesn't mean they have DHT-like quality. So just because you make primobolan from DHT doesn't mean it's going to make your prostate get enlarged or it's going to cause hair loss or anything like that. So they lose the properties of DHT. They're just using that as the base molecule, and I think that's important. How to combine them? I mean, there's so many different cycles you can combine. The last 8 weeks, I like a testosterone, masteron, winstrol, trenbolone combination. Those 4 compounds seem to me to be the best. And then the last 2 weeks, I like to, if it's available, if not, it doesn't matter, to add some halotestin in. That's always been my go-to. I don't recommend primobolan anymore because there's no real primobolan around. I mean, I've probably seen maybe 1 person or 2 people that I work with that have real, it's not even called primobolan anymore, it's called, they take the P off, they call it rimobolan now. And I've seen it actually from a pharmacy in the Middle East there. And that's probably the only version I've ever seen that's real. Because I sell a lot of these Roy test kits on DavePalumbo.com. You can test your steroids. Some of them you could actually test and see how much of each compound is in there. You can test your clenbuterol. I'll tell you one thing: the most fake thing is primobolan. I would never bet a single penny on the fact that any primobolan is real. That's how often it's not real. And usually they don't just put nothing in there. They put testosterone propionate in there usually because people feel it and they think it's real. The problem is if you're a woman and you use it, you're going to have massive side effects from that. So I would stay away from primobolan, or at least test it. If you have a sample of it and you want to buy the testing kits, you test it and see if it's real. And most of the time it's going to come back as fake, however, that's a big problem. A lot of the Anavar is Dianabol out there. I mean, I've seen it like over and over and over. And people send me the vials. They put the stuff in the vial, it turns the color. They say, what do you think of this? And they send me the 2 vials. I said, did you look at the color chart? Yeah, it doesn't look like what I'm testing. I know, it looks like testosterone propionate. Oh, yeah, it does, now that I see that. So a lot of times the injectables are test propionate. A lot of times the orals that are not really what they're supposed to be are Dianabol. And it must just be because those 2 compounds are the cheapest to make. So they just substitute that and they slap a label on it and that's it. Unfortunately, in today's marketplace where you're using underground steroids, it's impossible to know what's in there unless you test this stuff. And believe me, everyone tells me I got a great contact, this person is awesome, and they know the stuff, and this has got to be real. Just test it. I guarantee you a lot of people don't even know, okay, whether it's real or not because they've never even tested it. So they can be telling you the stuff is good, and they don't know. If I'm using primobolan and it's really test propionate, I'm going to think the stuff is crazy strong if I don't know what's in there. Okay, so test your stuff.
Go to Deschamps Kyle. For someone diabetic and wanting to focus their diet around mainly proteins and fats to ensure good glucose levels, as long as energy is good, could you build a massive physique on 150 to 200 grams carbs while utilizing extreme high fat and protein off season?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. We know protein and fat are what build muscle, okay? So assuming you have enough of that to build and repair muscle and you give yourself enough carbs to fuel your workouts and give your brain a little fuel, you should be fine. You don't need to eat an excessive amount of carbs. The problem is that, especially with guys that are really big, is that the more food you put into their diet, the faster their metabolism goes. It's weird because you can give I can feed a guy a massive amount of food, 8 meals a day with shakes, and they can barely be gaining weight. And then I start dieting them and I take the food, I lower down the food, obviously, I lower the carbs. And they're losing, but they're not losing at a crazy rate. And I'm thinking, I was feeding them this massive amount of food and they could barely gain weight. And now I'm having trouble, stripping body fat off them. Because when you lower your food, you lower your metabolism a little bit too. Your body knows what's going on. So the act of eating a lot of food will amp the metabolism. So sometimes, you put 150 grams of carbs, which is usually in a contest situation would be more than, enough to fuel everything you're doing. But now you're adding muscle and you might need a little more fuel. So adding extra protein and fat could solve that problem. You gotta have to experiment and find the sweet spot. If I'm dealing with someone who is diabetic, obviously I don't want to give them an enormous amount of carbs, only because then they're going to have to take an enormous amount of insulin to keep their blood sugars in check, which some people don't care about. But I try to find that balance in there.
Let's go to Victor E. Fitness. Dave, how long could you stay on cytomel? Is it possible to stay on it for 8 months at a time?
I mean, you could stay on cytomel the rest of your life if you want. It's a hormone replacement. It's like taking testosterone the rest of your life. And despite what people will say, taking thyroid hormone will not shut you down permanently, just like taking testosterone won't shut you down permanently. Can some people get shut down permanently? Of course, because there's always a couple people that maybe don't have good thyroid function anyway, or maybe it does shut them down. I mean, but by and far, what I've seen, I've actually helped a girl. She came to me, she wanted me to help her with a diet. And she's like, I've been on cytomel T3 for 5 years straight. I said, why? Because she wasn't lean by any means. She's like, I'm just afraid to stop taking it, because I started taking. So she basically had put herself on a replacement dose. She wasn't taking an excessive amount. I think she was taking 50 micrograms a day, which is probably a replacement dose. I said, I'm going to tell you how to come off it. And we weaned her off it over, I think, 4 weeks, very slowly. And she's fine. And she was fine. She was, and matter of fact, she got leaner when she came off of it, because sometimes, when you take a certain dose, it's not actually enough. And so her thyroid was okay. It was a normal range, but it might have been in low normal range. So I got her off of it. She didn't gain not a single pound. She didn't rebound. Her body, she went for blood work like 2 months after that, and her levels were normal. So, I wouldn't recommend taking them that long. I don't think it's necessary. But if you're doing like a 16-week or 18-week contest prep, and then all of a sudden, another show pops up in 2 or 3 weeks later, and you wind up staying on 20 weeks, it's not the end of the world. Your body will turn itself back on. But I will tell you this: you got to give yourself like a good 4 to 6 weeks before you're going to feel absolutely normal. Some people, I noticed this when I would do it. I would shed a little hair when I would stop the cytomel. And then it would come back like after like 2 or 3 weeks. And then I hit 30 years old and it never came back. But that didn't have anything to do with cytomel. I was just losing my hair anyway. But the point is that your body will turn itself back on. It's a very simple feedback loop. Take away T3, TSH goes up, your thyroid starts producing thyroid hormone again. Unless you are hypothyroid legitimately because of some kind of medical condition. Hashimoto's, you're just low thyroid to begin with. Some people don't even discover that they're low thyroid until they actually use a dose of it and say, oh my God, I feel great. I'm actually losing weight now. I don't know what was wrong with me. And then they come off of it and then they go get tested and they find out they're low. Well, they were probably low before they even took cytomel or any kind of thyroid hormone. And then they just found this out. So by and far, like I said, I wouldn't do 8 months just unless you really had to, but 4 months is probably safe.
Time for 3 more questions. Let's go to TJ the Jet. I haven't run DECA in quite a while, many years, but I was thinking about giving it another try. If I'm running 900 mg of sust, roughly what dosage should you DECA to get max gains and no, quote, performance issues? 500 mg enough or too much?
He's doing 100 milligrams of test a week, he said?
900.
Oh, 900, okay. When guys are doing 1,000 milligrams around that dosage, which is a really good building dosage for testosterone, I usually recommend 400 to 600 milligrams of DECA. If you tend to have performance issues because it raises your prolactin so much, I would stay more towards the 400 milligram mark. I don't know that many people back in the day when 400 milligrams was like the dose people used back in the day, because they would come in these little like 2 ml vials from American pharmacies. It would be 200 milligrams for the whole bottle. So you would take 2 of those a week. And no one ever complained of side effects. There would be that one person that was very sensitive to DECA that had a problem, but very few people complain. Nowadays, because it comes in a 10 cc bottle, it's 2 to 300 milligrams per cc. Guys do 3 cc's. Before you know it, you're on 900 milligrams a week of DECA. That will raise your prolactin a lot higher than, say, 400 milligrams will, and you'll have a problem. Back in the day when I had torn my quad and I was recovering, I was on HRT at that. That was my HRT years. And I was taking 200 milligrams of testosterone a week. So what I did was, instead of the 200 milligrams of testosterone, I took 100 milligrams of testosterone. I took 100 milligrams of DECA. And man, did I feel that 100 milligrams. What a huge difference. I grew just from that 100, because I hadn't done anything for like 8 years, other than just the TRT. And now I put this 100 milligrams of DECA, and it was amazing how sensitive my body was, because my receptors were so clean. And I got a really good response, and I got no side effects whatsoever because it was a very low dose. So less is better sometimes, but obviously if you're taking 900 milligrams a test, you're trying to put on massive amounts of size. I wouldn't go any lower than 400 milligrams.
Let's go to Floyd Menta. Correct me if I'm pronouncing his name incorrectly. Tim Belknap or Belknap?
Belknap, I guess, yeah.
Belknap, yeah. Was he the godfather in terms of insulin implementation in bodybuilding?
I didn't know him personally, but back in the day, obviously. But he was the first person to actually say, hey, yes, I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I need to take insulin, and I know I'm growing from my insulin. I knew a guy also back in the day. He was a power lifter. He was 100% natural, this guy. He was a type 1 diabetic, and this guy had a lot of muscle on his body. And he also told me he was convinced it was because because he took exogenous insulin. For whatever that means. I guess, because think about it. If you take exogenous insulin and you eat a lot of food, you have to take more insulin. So I guess, if you're very, very diligent about the way you take your insulin and as a diabetic, and are always testing neurotically throughout the day, invariably you overtake your insulin so that you keep your blood sugars a little on the lower side. And it obviously has some sort of an anabolic effect long term. So Tim noticed that, I guess, and he was always like a big, he always talked about that, and a big believer in the fact that he was, but, he was also on anabolics, so who knows? He wasn't like he was the biggest guy of the day. He just was very outspoken about the fact that he was a diabetic and that he took insulin. So he was also a smart guy. I didn't even know this, but Tim Belknap actually, he might even to this day, I should probably contact him and get him on my show, but he breeds boa constrictors too. Very well-known boa constrictor breeder. So he was a smart guy. He obviously knew what he was doing science-wise. He was very micromanaging his blood sugars, and he got a nice effect from it. And obviously, he's still alive today and healthy because of the fact that he micromanaged his diabetes and didn't just put his head in the sand and not worry about it,
Last question from Big Cherry Fit. As Dorian Yates has stated, why is new weight equipment basically garbage compared to the old school Nautilus and Flex Fitness? So do you share that sentiment, or what do you make of Dorian having a strong favoritism for the older equipment as compared to what's being produced today?
I think we get used to what we grow up using. So I mean, if in my heyday or when I was training, I used mostly hammer strength equipment because that was like the new equipment. That was the equipment that when I was coming up, everyone wanted hammers because it worked. They worked independently, and you could put free weights on them, and they especially on the chest machines, they came in, and I loved that. So I would always say that those are the best because that's what I used when I trained. I have to believe that the equipment today is better, okay? Majority of it, because the technology is better, right? I've seen some of these new machines. They're pretty amazing. The problem is it's hard to make a machine better than it was. When you get a machine that's perfect, like that Nautilus pullover machine was so finely tuned perfect, and I know that's one of Dorian's favorite machines. You can't really make it better. And so anyone who tries to make it better is just gonna fail, obviously, because it's not gonna have the same feel. When you have a perfect machine, you just take that machine and you make the same machine with maybe a few little nuances and on it, and there's no reason to try to make it better. That's why when I see guys today trying to come up with these ideas and change how people take steroids. Oh, you know what the new thing with HRT now is? Microdosing. You got to microdose. You got to take a shot every day, subcutaneously. Look, first of all, I can't even get guys to take their multivitamins every day because they can't remember, okay? And who the hell wants to stick themselves every day? Believe me, if taking this stuff every day was better, everyone would do it. It doesn't. These are long-acting compounds. You know, we figured out a long time ago that every other day dosing, okay, when you're on a big cycle is the best way to get a nice even. There's no reason to take it every day because you turn into a pincushion, okay? Likewise, if you're on hormone replacement, okay, you can get away with a shot once a week, but if you really want to be neurotic, you do twice a week. There's no reason to take it every single day. So people try to make things more complicated and try to make things seem like, oh, we got to do this better than it was before. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, I like the new machines today that didn't exist back then because now you're coming up with something that wasn't around. Don't try to take a machine that was perfect and make it better because then you're going to have comparisons and people are going to say, well, the old one was better. Just like, you know, they have people, they do these remakes of these movies and they ruin these classic old-time movies, you know, not even old-time, from the 80s or whatever, and they redo the movie and it ruins the mystique of it because the movie was so good the first time, you didn't have to remake it. No one's going to remake The Godfather because it was perfect the first time. Same thing with a certain machine. If a machine is great, leave it. You could bring it back into the modern age, but don't try to redesign it. Make machines that haven't existed. Go to Flex Lewis's gym. Look at some of the equipment there. That's cutting edge equipment. I dare anyone to tell me that equipment there is not the best equipment that ever existed in the history of the bodybuilding world. So while some of the machines from the 70s and 80s might be cool, and I'm sure Joe Gold made a couple of handmade machines that were pretty cool, by and far the machines today are better.
Godfather or Goodfellas?
You can't remake either one of those movies. It would be sacrilegious to do it.
On that note, that's going to do for this episode of
Godfather. I like The Godfather better. I enjoy Goodfellas, but I think Godfather is the original, you know.
Yeah, I'm a big Goodfellas. There's so much quotable stuff out of Goodfellas, so many memeable stuff out of Goodfellas. It's one of those movies that if it's ever on TV, I don't care what I'm doing, I'm stuck for the next hour and a half while it's on. It
sucks you in. I you know, as you love the actors.
Same with Scarface. Scarface is, I've seen it a million times. If Scarface is on, I don't care what I'm doing. I don't care what point of the movie it's at. That's it.
You know why people like Goodfellas better though? Because there's funny part, even though it's like
exactly
it's funny in there. The Godfather is a very serious movie, and that's why if you're really into the mafia and you want to really in the old time mafia back in the 70s and stuff like that, then The Godfather's the movie of movies, you know.
So that's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. We have a special episode of Iron Rage coming up. Can't tease exactly who's going to be on it, but it's going to be Lee Priest and a special guest, and these two together should provide an absolute dynamic episode. So that's going to be up tomorrow on the channel. If you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss any of our upcoming shows, segments, or updates. For Dave Palumbo and Tyler Shore, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.